It's very rare that a game is granted the opportunity to die 2 whole times, but that's exactly what Multiversus has done. It is dead, in fact. What's particularly sad is it actually looks like it was on the cusp of being saved. Now, though, all it's going to be is yet another failure from WB Games. And you can see the managerial logic that WB were going with here, right? They see other sorts of games performing well in the market, right? The big live services. And then they think, we're Warner Bros. We've got IP everywhere. So what do? You smash those two things together. You've got the, because last time we got demonetized, the Self-Deletion Squad, which was obviously them trying to get some Destiny money, and Multiversus, which was in fact going for Brawlhalla, which is actually a super popular game from Ubisoft. It's just one of those ones that's been a bit of a sleeper hit. Now, compared to some other big live services, Multiversus cannot have been the most expensive thing in the world to make, but we do know directly from Mr. Zaslav of WB that, while it did hurt their finances quite a bit, when we analyze how the whole thing rolled out, it's obvious it was basically a complete shit show. And because we do like to go a little bit deeper in the old research, we found some fun quotes, such as insiders calling the leadership of WB Games ineffectual and trend-chasing. But before that, something you don't know about me is that I enjoy building things like this app front end, and that's why today's sponsor, Boot.dev, is so relevant, because with Boot, you'll learn back-end web development using Python and Go. I've got a sick discount for you. Those are 2 excellent languages, and they will set you up well as a programmer. And why I love Boot, though, specifically is how it works, because it's basically a fantasy RPG. You've got quests, XP, public leaderboards. I mean, just look at the public leaderboard updating in real time as real users are doing lessons, and so much more, like the spell book, which is packed with programming reference material, but you unlock it as you progress in a natural way. It's so cool. And that's all because Boot's founder loves RPGs, actually a viewer of our channels, and that's why he's built it for people like us. And you'll learn real, practical programming skills, not just basics. That means portfolio projects, mastering Git, and what you'll actually need for a real job. And the best news is you'll get 25% off your first purchase at boot.dev/Bellular News, and it's zero risk. You can browse their content, do demos, and a lot more for free. And when you do buy, they're backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. Okay, so Multiversus launched into an open beta, at least the live service game definition of open beta, because what it did launch as was, of course, a fully monetized product, which is just like Fortnite, Overwatch, and many other games. And at that time, they did sell a Founders Pack, with the core sell basically just being, hey, you're early. This is a hell of a deal for our most dedicated fans. You'll get loads of characters. Buy this now. And when it launched, all seemed to be amazing. The player count was 150k on Steam, but when I say seem really is the operative word here, because the numbers absolutely plummeted, and they soon got so bad that both WB and the developer, who are called Player First Games, decided to just pull the beta entirely. Essentially, there was much needed fixes, design changes, and then just content cadence, and they could not do all of that at the same time. So they pulled it down, local play would remain, and the plan was, when it returns, it's going to be ready and it will be successful. That obviously is not going to happen. So 1 year and a giant set of changes later, the game relaunches. It doesn't launch to a bang though. It more launches to a pop. Like, you hear it, but then the sound is gone very, very quickly, because Steam hit 114k, and yeah, the consoles probably did quite well, but this time it was different than last time. And not in the way they wanted, because the player fall off was actually even worse. People left faster. Now, it's hard to say exactly what made people leave, but if I was to say there's one thing that was the main problem, probably progression changes. Those played a massive role. You'd basically swear that Player First set out to create a bad impression. Now, obviously, we do not know if everything was their idea, whose, drumbeat they were marching to. But what players found when they logged into the relaunch of the game, which should have been a big exciting thing, was progression that was massively slowed down. And even worse, you could no longer freely use any character in offline play, which, if you're playing a game like this on a console, is really fun and something you'll want to do. Now, of course, all that slow progression was made up for in the form of premium currency, which they very much wanted you to buy. So suffice it to say, the game made a noise, but people just fizzled out. And while the future patches would genuinely try to improve this, they were way, way too late. And it even seems the one patch that could have saved this game is, confirmed to be too late. Of course, as with any death, we've got to talk about the funeral arrangements. So microtransactions are disabled, and on the 30th of May 25, the sales will end, the story delistings will happen, and servers will shut down. That'll be that. There is a silver lining, and that's that the game will stay in your library and it will have functional offline play, but even for that, there is a catch. That's only the case if you create a local save file during Season 5. And actually, it's Season 5 that stings the most. It's kind of just like X-Defiant, where Multiversus has got its death sentence even though it has got content ready to ship. And in this case, it was content that was a proper, genuine effort to actually win people back, right? They've made game-wide changes to things like movement speed and abilities, which is absolutely core bread and butter for this genre. Another big thing is hit pause. So hit pause is being cut, basically in order to open up more combos. I'm not big into the genre, but I've got to imagine that'll be pretty big for fighting game fans who just want to do more combos and have more skill expression. And also, there's a stack of things, right? There's a stack of character reworks, and Lola Bunny and Aquaman. I know the internet likes Lola Bunny. They probably would have bought some things for her. But that's not really going to be. Like, the patch is going to come out, but it's basically completely pointless. And also kind of sad, if you actually look at the marketing for this patch, it's really good. They actually started to, I know it's an overused word, but they started to cook. Now, to be clear, I'm not making the factual claim that this update would save Multiversus, right? That if they put this out and didn't just say, by the way, we're killing the game, that suddenly it would turn around. I can't make that claim because it's basically impossible to make that claim, because I don't know the future, and WB Games also don't know the future, and that's actually what makes it sting. These changes have been made, the content's been made, it seems to be what the community wants, and it's never going to have the chance to save the game. Now, there is a Save Multiversus hashtag campaign going on. It's backed by, a pretty broad coalition of players. You've got pros, you've got casuals, people saying that these changes could be the start of a new era, but it's you guys against the Warner Bros. Games and the Warner Bros. Board. I have a feeling they're not really going to do anything, because they actually have put a lot of cash into this, and they certainly feel burned. Something else happened with the launch of this game. WB also acquired the studio that makes Multiversus, Player First Games. Now, we don't know how much they spent on that acquisition, but in November 2024, David Zaslav would explicitly call out Multiversus, right? He blamed it in particular for a $100 million impairment that quarter, which was, of course, on top of other, hundreds of millions of dollars of impairments in that year. So they were having a pretty bad time. Fiscal year 2024-2025, which we're just about at the end at now, was obviously really bad for them. The games they had out were Multiversus, Quidditch Champions, and Batman Arkham Shadows. And it's kind of crazy, but of those three, only Batman, a VR game, was a success with 1 million sales, which sounds completely unhinged for VR, but there's also a reason why. They did a deal with Meta, so that game came bundled with, and does actually to this day come bundled with any Meta Quest 3s or 3Ss that you buy. So it's been pretty bad vibes for the company, especially because Suicide Squad and Mortal Kombat, those released in the previous financial year. And that's extra bad if financial year 24 to 25 had revenue projections that involved things like Suicide Squad selling loads of skins and DLC and I don't know, whatever balls they probably hoped they could sell. I mean, man, as far as publisher-wide shit shows go, this is certainly one of the big ones. There's even another funny thing, right? Allegedly, according to rumors anyway, while Multiversus was live, Warner Brothers did not want to dilute the appeal of the game by pushing for more collaborations with the likes of Fortnite for DC skins. So if that is true, it would actually mean that Multiversus did not just fail to make money on its own, which it did, but it also actively impeded other licensing efforts that could have helped to subsidize the WB Games branch, because they basically wanted all their brand things to go into Multiversus. Just pretty bad. But overall, right, the facts are there's no outrunning fundamentals that are bad that do not work. Multiversus was not driving revenue, and if you were one of the few people who were helping it drive revenue, you're probably going to feel screwed. Let me explain what I mean here. So progression was really, really slow whenever it relaunched, and that's obviously to push people to buy more things. Then, of course, there is the Founders Pack. Now, this was sold when the game originally came out, and that pack had 30 character tokens, and the idea is you'd use those tokens to unlock characters. Now, of course, a lot of people did not spend all 30 of their Founders Pack tokens. There's people who've got like 20 tokens, 15 tokens, that are now literally useless. You see, including Season 5, Multiversus has a total of 35 characters, which technically does mean that there's enough tokens or enough characters to, buy one with every single token that you got. But because, of course, in the past you could progress faster, loads of people do just have loads of leftover tokens. So the upshot here is a major part of the Founders Pack value proposition was those 30 tokens. And for many people, a large portion of those tokens are now null and void and useless, even though, of course, you handed over real money for them. You can at least, I suppose, rest easy knowing that WB Games pissed that money away in yet another attempt to chase somebody else's success. Here, you definitely think about Smash Bros, right? It's the obvious one, and yeah, any platform fighter is going to live or die by its comparison to Smash. And many have died. You can look at PlayStation All-Stars. There are others, ones that exist, just kind of doing their own thing, not really that expensive to make. You've got, your Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 1 and 2. You've got Rivals of Aether. But none of that stuff is actually what WB were going for. They wanted to emulate Brawlhalla. And Brawlhalla is a true sleeper hit from Ubisoft. And I say sleeper hit because, man, loads of people play it and you never hear much about it, but it has persisted for years and years across all the major platforms. Like, as I wrote the script of this video, regularly it is peaking at 17,000 concurrent Steam players. And if you go to the weeks before the cancellation of Multiversus, it was struggling to hit 1,000. So, yeah, they tried to take a shot, Brawlhalla. Very much didn't work. There's many reasons why, but here I think are the big ones. So both of these are free-to-play games with skins and characters that you can buy. But in Brawlhalla, you can pay $40 to unlock every original character added to the game, like at the point of the purchase and going into the future. And in 2023, where, yeah, they had fewer characters, but still, that was half the price. It was only $20. So there are people who've put $20 into that game. They can just play all the characters, which likely sets them up well for buying skins in the future, right? But what it means is that in terms of gameplay content, people can just kind of buy the game and not feel nickel and dimed. Contrast that then to the Founders Pack of Multiversus. It was there in 2023 and then it just disappeared. The game came back with an onerous progression model that just did not let people play all the different characters and have fun. I mean, the Brawlhalla business model makes so much more sense. Brawlhalla's also got a real long history of brand collabs, which will help to juice up their numbers, reactivate their players, whereas Multiversus was limited to Warner Bros, but then also not able to fully use all the Warner Bros IP because corporate shit. IP's a complex business. Then there's an obvious thing. So, take a look at these two games, especially Brawlhalla. Brawlhalla's a Flash game. That's kind of the meme way of saying it. What it is Adobe Air and the dev team's own custom engine, but you get the point. Compare the two of them, right? There's a phrase, and that's why I bring this up. Be cheap so you can be generous. And when you're cheap so you can be generous, you end up having 64 characters in your game and continual content and all of those good things that, of course, Brawlhalla has got. That's helped Brawlhalla to maintain, to sustain that player base. I mean, the number I quoted was just the Steam number. It's on phones, it's on consoles, the damn thing's everywhere. Whereas with Multiversus, it launched into a more competitive, crowded market where Brawlhalla was already the incumbent. When it first launched and caught on, they had loads of problems. When they relaunched it, they had loads of problems. It seems like Season 5 could have turned things around, but it seems like they would have needed to have launched with Season 5 with the relaunch. And I really doubt that this game is somehow going to get a third life. It should be kind of ridiculous. And then I think there's just the basic unit economics here, right? I mean, both sides. Think about cost, think about sales. For the two of these games, which one's more expensive to develop? Just looking at them. Obviously, the proposition Ubisoft are contending is way more sensible. And while sensible is not really a word that you sort of apply to Ubisoft all the time, it is really not one that you apply to WB Games. Let's talk about their future, because it's kind of screwed. WB Games' leader, David Haddad, left the company after 12 years, and speaking with Bloomberg, insiders said that his tenure was defined by, and this is a quote, a lack of strong, cohesive vision. And another quote, years of ineffectual trend chasing and wasted development time, which does seem to be quite true to me. And obviously it sucks for players, sucks if you like those IPs, right? You like those brands. It also goddamn sucks for the developers. Can you imagine being at Rocksteady? You've been shipping the Arkham games. I mean, what you're used to is pushing forward what combat systems are in action video games. Admittedly, this was Rocksteady leadership as well. But you're then thrown into Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, forced to make that. I mean, the brain drain, right? Just like org-wide, absolute shit show. But of course, you know, Broken Clock can be right twice a day, etc., etc. So they have had their wins. One of the big wins has obviously been Hogwarts Legacy, which really has been their saving grace. I mean, obviously it was the highest selling game of 2023. It was also, I've seen one number that it was the 14th highest selling game of 2024, so the year after it came out, and I saw another number that said the 11th, which basically just means it came out in 2023, it is still doing gargantuan sales to this day. Now, as for this story's developer, Player First Games, we're not exactly sure. I mean, it does look like, given the right conditions and given the time, they could actually do good work. Look at the Season 5 changes and how the community actually do seem to be on side with the developers. But we don't really know what's going on. They do have other projects, so at the minimum, I would expect downsizing. As for their future lineup, well, there is a sequel to Hogwarts Legacy. That's a long way off. There's going to be a definitive edition, which will likely help to boost up their sales. Then the next thing we know about is Monolith's Wonder Woman. And I cannot wait for the investigative report on that thing, because it may not be out until 2026, and that's with reports of it being rebooted in early 2024. I believe the director went, and then the support of WB Games Montreal. That was needed, but that was also enabled by them working in a game about the Flash. That game was sort of cancelled as a result of the worldwide, please for the love of God, no more Ezra Miller and anything, go away movement that happened. So that's kind of rough. And again, it's another part of that trend. How many times do we see games with years and years and years of development when really what we get is something that was rebooted 2 years before ship and cobbled together? I mean, that's what happened to the last, 3 BioWare games. Anyway, beyond that, there's their Adult Swim Games label, which they sort of self-nuked, so that's basically dead. I'm sure NetherRealm are doing something, and Rocksteady are sort of back on piece, but none of that is going to be anytime soon. But I do have good news for you. You can go and play Game of Thrones Conquest on mobile today, and you can look forward to Netmarble's Game of Thrones on PC, console, and mobile. Yeah, it's a game called Game of Thrones King's Road. I don't know what to make of that. So basically, what have WB Games got? They don't really have that many games at the minute. What they do have, though, is IP. They're going to license that IP to externals, like with Netmarble and the King's Road game, and brand collabs with other games. They're just going to have to do that for now because they've completely screwed the pooch internally. But to be completely honest with you, and this is really selfish, man, this does make for really, really fun news. And if bullshit corporate shenanigans are your thing, yeah, you know the way PSN went down? It actually goes quite a bit more broadly than that. Exposes a bit of systemic risk. So you can learn more about that in the next video.